Bonjour, je m'appelle...
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Moustaki. I'm French. I would like to wish all of you, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Europe, a warm welcome to the closing ceremony of the Conference on the Future of Europe. I participated in the European Citizens Panel and in the European Plenary. My daughter, Najis, who is here today, was born during this conference, just like our hundreds of recommendations. Exactly 1 year after the inaugural ceremony of the conference, it is an honor for me, alongside my fellow citizens, to accompany this historic closing ceremony. It's a pleasure for me to officially declare open the ceremony. We'll begin with Danse l'Europe, Dance Europe.
Blocage. Il s'agit d'une œuvre emblématique de la présidence française du Conseil de l'Union européenne.
Tu viens d'arriver sur la Lune pour regarder le Soleil. De l'autre côté, tu regardes la Terre qui brille. Reviens face au Soleil. Les pieds bien posés au sol. Commence une marche sur place en faisant rouler les hanches. Continue à marcher et ajoute naturellement l'ondulation des épaules. Tes mains flottent tout autour de ta tête, l'une après l'autre. Du visage à la nuque, sur les côtés. Le bout de tes doigts caresse ta nuque en passant. Tes mains deviennent des poissons qui s'évitent d'un côté puis de l'autre de ton corps. Croise tes doigts. Tu tiens la lourde chaîne. À son extrémité, sens bien le poids qui te tire vers le bas. Balance le poids lentement d'un côté, puis de l'autre. D'un côté, fais-le passer derrière ta tête en regardant le ciel. Continue à jouer avec. Et dépose la chaîne devant toi. Tu découvres une nouvelle planète. Ici, le végétal a pris le pouvoir. Tes bras deviennent des lianes qui poussent et se développent autour de toi. Ton buste regarde d'un côté, puis de l'autre. Les lianes continuent leur balancement. Elles s'enroulent autour de ton buste, de tes hanches, puis de ta jambe et vont jusqu'au sol. Redresse-toi, fais quelques pas. Tu es face à un rideau de lierre. Avec une main, écarte le rideau. Traverse un long couloir. Tu retrouves la cascade. Plonge tes bras à travers cette cascade pour attraper un arc. Redresse-toi pour viser la citadelle. Tends l'arc en ouvrant une jambe. Détends-le. Tends-le encore plus fort. Et tire la flèche. Tes bras deviennent des tentacules. Tes tentacules fouillent dans le brouillard épais à la recherche d'un javelot en or planté dans un arbre. Il est là devant toi, prends le javelot, arrache-le, fais demi-tour et lance-le. Plonge à nouveau pour récupérer un arc. Redresse-toi pour viser la citadelle. Tends l'arc en ouvrant une jambe. Et tire la flèche. Tes tentacules ramassent un filet de pêcheur. Fais-le tourner largement autour de ta tête 1 fois, 2 fois, 3 fois et tu le jettes à l'eau. Regarde derrière toi. Tu es face à la mer. Reçois un ballon et dessine un grand S du haut vers le bas, puis du bas vers le haut. Jette-le derrière toi. À cheval sur un tonneau, attrape des 2 mains une grande cuillère en bois dressée devant toi. Touille largement une première fois, puis une deuxième. Plonge la cuillère entre tes jambes, lance-la vers le ciel en sautant. Fais demi-tour. À nouveau sur le tonneau, attrape la cuillère géante des 2 mains, touille encore et encore, plonge la cuillère entre tes jambes et lance-la vers le ciel en sautant. Attrape la corde devant toi et avance en tirant d'une main, puis de l'autre, avance, une main, puis l'autre main. Stop! Fais onduler la corde de haut en bas avec tout ton corps. Encore une fois, encore plus grand, encore plus fort. Lance la corde en l'air et fais un tour complet sur toi-même. Pose ton pied loin sur le côté pour créer une statue antique. Reviens. Pose l'autre pied sur le côté. Crée une nouvelle statue. Reviens. Statue. Nouvelle statue. Change de statue. Dernière statue. Saute d'un îlot à l'autre. Saute, saute, statue. Saute, saute, statue. Saute, saute, statue. Saute, saute, statue. Tes bras parallèles l'un à l'autre deviennent des pinceaux. Laisse balancer ton bassin d'un côté et de l'autre jusqu'à peindre de grands 8. Suspends ton mouvement. Regarde tes mains et amène-les devant ton visage. Tes 2 mains forment une pelle. Fais un pas de côté, tu creuses. De l'autre côté, creuse encore. Et devant toi, tu creuses. Ouvre les bras. Redresse-toi. Regarde le ciel. Tu accueilles une pluie chaude en tournant sur toi-même. Offre ton cou à cette pluie. Retrouve la pelle. Fais un pas de côté, tu creuses. De l'autre côté, creuse encore. Et devant toi, tu creuses. Accueille la pluie, les bras grands ouverts, en tournant sur toi-même. Une bulle d'air énorme arrive dans tes bras. Berce la bulle d'air, fais-la voyager en marchant sur le côté. La bulle d'air s'envole, suis-la du regard vers le ciel et accompagne-la des mains le plus haut possible. Lève un genou qui t'entraîne vers l'avant, puis le deuxième, et continue cette marche en levant un bras, puis l'autre, et encore, et encore, et encore. Accélère la cadence et libère toute ton énergie en donnant libre cours à ton imagination pour bouger ton corps. Cette danse est la tienne, tu sais, fais-toi plaisir, tu es libre de tes mouvements. Bouge le bassin. Bouge le dos, c'est bien. Plus grand. Bouge la tête aussi. Ralentis progressivement. et tourne sur toi-même. Arrête-toi. Délicatement, tes bras étreignent ton corps. Tes mains se détachent et vont tranquillement flotter autour de ta tête. Fais-les passer derrière ta tête en regardant le ciel tout doucement. Relâche tes bras, détends tes mains. Ferme les yeux, inspire, expire. Inspire, ouvre les yeux et salue les personnes autour de toi. Merci à toutes et à tous de m'avoir accompagné dans ce voyage. Merci pour la danse.
Hallo? Hello,
Hello, my name is Gabriele Hagenberg and I'm from Germany. Like Linda, I've been a participant in one of the European Citizens panels, and today I'm celebrating my birthday with all of you.
Mein Geburtstag.
My birthday is also Europe Day, and in future perhaps it will be a public holiday for the whole of Europe, for all Europeans. It is a great pleasure for me to be here at this solemn moment. My word for the conference is exciting. Exciting because I was able to contribute towards the citizens' recommendations, and also because I have made many European friends. The co-chairs of the executive board of the conference are with us today here. Each of them represents one of the three institutions of the European Union. They have worked closely together in order to make this process possible in the first place. So I give the floor now to Guy Verhofstadt, who is a member of the European Parliament.
Merci beaucoup, Mesdames les Présidents de la Commission et du Parlement.
Thank you very much, Presidents of the Commission, Parliament, President of the Republic, Prime Minister. Today, it's not us, but citizens who are going to be handing over the final report on the conference on the future of Europe. Let me take this opportunity to thank my two co-chairs for their constructive cooperation. It was a little bit like a ménage à trois. It was difficult, sometimes frightening, but always passionate. This report, dear friends, contains 49 objectives which have emerged from over 300 proposals and measures, and all of these are based on the proposals of our citizens and have also been adopted by the plenary of the conference. These proposals, I believe, show us the path that the European Union should follow during the coming decades. It'll turn the Union more democratic, more integrated, a Union that can act more rapidly and in a more decisive manner when tackling the challenges of tomorrow. This result has only been made possible thanks to one thing: participation. The participation of our co-citizens. And on behalf of you all, I'd like to sincerely thank them for their active participation and sincere commitment.
Vous savez, pour nous, en tout cas pour moi je suis... Ça fait partie de mon travail. Mais pour nos concitoyens qui sont représentés ici, ce n'est pas le cas. Chacun d'entre vous, chacun d'entre eux a sacrifié du temps libre, des week-ends, plusieurs week-ends, pour s'engager, de temps en temps aussi pour fêter un petit peu, pour apporter surtout ses propres expériences, pour ouvrir des nouvelles perspectives. Eh bien, cette expérience m'a appris 3 choses. Tout d'abord, qu'il y a, je crois, beaucoup plus de cohérence, plus d'unité dans notre société que nous le croyons. Vous savez, nous sommes des hommes politiques, il y a aussi beaucoup de journalistes, et on a toujours tendance à catégoriser, à découper la population en différentes tranches. On les connaît, gauche, droite, le nord, le sud, les eurosceptiques d'une part, les europhiles d'autre part. En fait, la réalité est assez différente, je dois vous dire. En fait, presque tout le monde aime l'Europe. Tous les citoyens croient au projet européen, mais la plupart des gens...
All citizens believe in the European project, but most people are also of the opinion that the European Union doesn't currently fulfil their dream. So they may well love Europe, but at the same time, they're hugely critical when it comes to the working of the Union. And sometimes, I would say, for good reason.
During this conference, is that in contrast to what we think, people don't fear change. On the contrary, they urge us to reform the Union, and they want this to happen now. You know, when in 2019 the idea floated of this conference, the world was a very different place from the world we are in today. Since 2019, we have got a pandemic affecting millions of people, killing hundreds of thousands of humans, and now, 77 years after the end of the Second World War, we have again a devastating war on European soil, the result of brutal aggression, killing thousands of civilians, men, women and children alike. It's a war of illiberal autocracy against a liberal democracy, a war of Russian brutality against our European values. Look, let's tomorrow spot the difference on the 9th of May of this day. In Moscow, a parade with a delirium of arms, weapons and tanks. And here in Strasbourg, a festival of citizens with their European leaders expressing their renewed faith in our common peace project. That's the difference between Strasbourg. And whatever the outcome of this conflict, of this war in Ukraine will be, whatever my belief that liberal democracy will ultimately prevail, the fact is that the world of tomorrow will be a different place. It will be a world dominated by empires. China, Russia, India, the United States, of course. Well, in such a world order, dear friends, only Europe as a bloc can survive. Only united we can defend our values, we can protect the interests of our citizens. Because the European Union, that acts too little too late, as we have seen so many times, will not survive. And in that sense, I have to tell you that it's my firm conviction, European integration is no longer a question of choice. It has become a question of necessity, a question of survival. And the recommendations of the citizens and the conclusions of the conference offers, I think, us a roadmap to do that, to avoid that we become irrelevant or even disappear. A new, an effective, more democratic Europe is possible, a Europe that is sovereign, a Europe that is capable to act, and a Europe that leads planet Earth forward. And then my short final lesson. There is, I think, after this experience, no real opposition or contradiction between representative and participatory democracy. And I say that here where we do the representative democracy. On the contrary, I think in a modern democracy, both are necessary, and it's my firm belief that beyond elections, we need their citizens to institutionalize direct citizens' participation as an antidote to division in society. An antidote that is urgently needed against a democratic system that is slowly dying under our eyes, as it is poisoned by the almighty algorithms of Mr. Musk and Mr. Zuckerberg, who see humans only as profiles, and by state-sponsored Russian hackers or Chinese bots who are treating citizens, in fact, as social psychopaths, because that's what they do. So there is no time to waste. Let's be loyal to the outcome of the conference. Let's implement its conclusions as soon as possible, because it's the will of the people, and let the will of the people prevail. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you.
Im Namen des französischen Rats.
On behalf of the French Council Presidency, let me now give the floor to Minister Clément Beaune, Acting Chairman of the Conference. Please.
Mesdames les présidentes, Monsieur le
Presidents, President of the Republic, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, members of parliaments, co-chairs, citizens. 3 years ago, the Conference on the Future of Europe was a bit of a crazy idea. A year ago, the conference was launched here, and now we can see that it's been a success. As Guy said, as I'm sure Mrs. Switzer will say, this conference owes you, citizens, everything. You're some of the few of the citizens who have been committed. You represent these tens of thousands who got involved and the hundreds of thousands who made contributions online. You've been involved in long hours of work to discuss, debate, reflect, criticise and make proposals on the future of Europe. Countless participants have been represented by you, and I'd like to thank them and give them a round of applause.
Ce succès se mesure également à l'aune.
I think this success is shown by the very specific and clear 49 objectives and the 300 clear measures that you have patiently drawn up. You've drawn up a credible and ambitious roadmap for all of us. You have created a vision of Europe for the decades to come, a brave and protecting Europe that takes on a leading role in the climate and environment, that is more effective in what it does and gives citizens their place in decision making. But this conference is not only a success, it is first and foremost an example for our Europe. We have seen Europe move forward when crises take place, the nights of European Council meetings. But you have shown that we can act collectively and effectively via patient discussion, reasoned debate, by placing our common values above specific interests. This conference is first and foremost an example for the world. Today, on the 9th of May, Mr. Putin has decided to bring war to our continent, but at the same time you've chosen democracy. I predict that on the 9th of May, history will recall how in Russia there were military parades, whereas here in Strasbourg hundreds of citizens came together to refound our union, and history will show that you were right.
Chers participants à la conférence, chers
citizens, participants, presidents, this success and this example obliges us, obliges our institutions to follow up on these proposals, to establish priorities courageously without taboos. Legislating always means making choices, and choices will have to be made. And we will make choices, and we will come back to you in a regular and transparent manner to explain our choices. Citizens, participants in the conference. We are pleased to have been able to count on you. You can now count on us. Thank you.
Zum Abschluss hat das Wort.
Let me now give the floor to Mrs. Dubravka-Šuica, Vice President of the European Commission. Please.
Dear Presidents, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear citizens. The Schuman Declaration states that Europe will be built on concrete achievements and solidarity. This remains true today. Europe is a journey. Today, we present the final report and its 49 proposals of the Conference on the Future of Europe to the 3 presidents. This report is built on trust and hope for a better Europe. This conference proves that it was the right choice to put citizens at the heart of the process. We now start delivering on your incredible work. I will work hard to ensure that we are deserving of your trust. The conference requires courage and leap of faith to deliberate on our future, because we have seized that opportunity together. European democracy will never be the same again. A defining moment of my life was Croatia's accession to the Union, to the European Union. It is a privilege to me as a Croat, as a European, to lead the Commission's work on the conference. And we are doing this with the war in Ukraine raging on our continent. Having personally witnessed bloody war, I cannot take this achievement in deliberative democracy for granted. I know that this hemicycle is the center of European representative democracy. But from now on, I will truly miss the contribution of citizens, because your participation enriches our representative democracy, and 49 proposals are proof of this. The conference kicked off in a pandemic, but you stayed with us, you stuck with us. The European Citizens Panel took place across the European Union. We were in Maastricht on the anniversary of the treaty of the same name. Then war broke out on European soil. At the panel in Dublin, you, citizens, made a spontaneous stand for Ukraine. It was a touching moment of solidarity. Our aim was to design a process to be as inclusive and representative as possible. If this conference is a success, it is thanks to the contribution of the broadest spectrum of stakeholders, civil society, citizens, and social partners. I am aware that the conference was not perfect, but we adapted when necessary, and we have learned valuable lessons. The deliberative process allows our Europe to grow. It is a human and democratic process. You may remember one mother, whom we already saw, who spoke at the last plenary with her new baby in her arms. Some young citizens were so motivated that one day they will be politicians themselves, I hope. The older and wiser ones, they were proud to build a brighter future for their children and for their grandchildren. And all of us were part of the emotional standing ovation of acclamation 10 years ago here in this hemicycle. There was skepticism at the beginning, but many skeptics were convinced by the enthusiastic dedication of the citizens. Thanks to our courage to come together to deliberate on our common future, European democracy is forever changed. 3 European institutions working together in a unique endeavor. And to conclude, I will conclude with a quote from one of you, from one citizen who said, "Read the proposals well and implement them." We believe in it. This is what citizens told us. Building the house of European democracy and creating an ecosystem of democratic citizens' engagement requires belief, a trust in our European values, a belief in ourselves and each other to build a democracy which is fit for the future. Dear all, I'm sure that our democracy is louder than Putin's bombs. Thank you very much.
The working group members agreed on the need to tackle climate change and on the EU to continue to play the role of global leader.
And it is important to talk and debate, but wasting time is something we can no longer afford.
Zdraví evropských občanů nemůžeme vyčíslit.
The health of European citizens is not something that has a value that can be quantified.
A very strong feeling that we could and we should do, if it comes to health, much more at the European Union level, and that we should learn more from the pandemic.
War is unexpectedly at the borders of our union with significant humanitarian and economic consequences.
C'est clair que nous aspirons à une vision commune.
It's clear that we aspire to a common vision, which is that the European Union should be strong, stable and united. This would allow it to offer a model to the world and to defend its values, which would guarantee peace and international cooperation.
People are still being left behind in Europe. This is not good enough. On this, we can do better.
Es posible remodelar la Unión Europea.
It's possible to reshape the European Union without exhausting or destroying the framework of a renewed social contract.
Trasformazione digitale coinvolge.
Digital transformation concerns everyone. It helps us on a daily basis and will be more and more present in our lives.
Demonstrate that the digital future, it can be human-centered, and the cyber world, it can be designed to be trustworthy and safe.
Migration was, is, and will continue to be part of the human condition.
Citizens are asking for fair sharing of the migrant flows throughout the EU member states, easier application and faster integration of asylum seekers.
We focused on how to improve the opportunities and realities for young people to ensure that our young generation can achieve their true potential.
Die junge Generation hat es verdient, in einer Welt.
Our young people have the right to live in a world which is not destroyed by famine and war, and we have to do our utmost to make this possible.
Europäische Demokratie zu stärken.
European democracy needs to be strengthened. We need to breathe fresh life into European democracy. Our goal is to make the EU more understandable and accessible and strengthen our common European identity.
On the message from citizens, which was clear that values and rights are an absolute priority and are at the absolute centre of what it means to be part of the European Union.
And we are ready to go and do what's necessary.
This plenary has reached a consensus on the proposals. I therefore commend the consensus to the plenary.
Krásné odpoledne všem.
Good afternoon, everybody.
My name is Matusz Balolavek, and I come from the heart of Europe, from the Czech Republic. The word that sums up this conference for me is new. New. This has been something new from the outset. The conference counted on the active involvement of citizens from different corners of Europe, from different origins, who met to discuss challenges that can change the way the European Union works. Allow me now to invite 5 of our citizens to share their experiences with us and to tell us about some of the priorities that we have recommended or which have been added by the other components of citizens. Jorge Pazos from the Canary Islands in Spain, Tilde Carlson from Sweden, Jean-Régis de Vincey from France, Casper Parol from Poland, and Laura Maria Cinquini from Italy. So, dear colleagues, you have the floor. Go ahead. President Metsola, President Fonda, Leyen, President Macron, Prime Minister Costa, ministers, members of the plenary of the conference, colleagues, panelists across Europe, friends. In summary, my dear Europeans, my name is Jorge Pazos, and it's my honor to be the first citizen to take the floor today. I come from the Canary Islands, and throughout this whole process, I have felt extremely fortunate to consider this hemicycle as a second home, a home for all Europeans, and on behalf of all of the panelists here, those attending in person, those attending remotely, allow me to start by thanking the European Parliament, the Council and the Commission for giving us the opportunity to be involved in reforming Europe. We have got to know citizens from every country of Europe, politicians, people working in the social sphere, extending our horizons. We've grown as Europeans. And for this to happen, we've made sacrifices. We have put our lives on hold. We've taken holiday days from our work. And when it comes to the European Citizens Panel, we've spent 9 weekends away from our families. Without a doubt, it's been a magnificent experience. There were difficulties in our path. We didn't always get clear answers. We know that the proposals will not be implemented overnight, but we have trust that you will do everything necessary to ensure they are implemented, through respect for the work we've done, but also through respect for all Europeans. If we, as citizens, have been capable of working together and to reach a consensus, you can and must do the same. All of us have been on a long journey, and now that the work in plenary has come to an end, I think we can be proud of what we've achieved. We will be presenting you with 8 horizontal subjects which provide an optimistic and clear mandate for Europe. And now I'd like to pass the floor to my colleague Tilde.
Hej! Jag heter Tilde och jag är 21 år gammal och kommer från en liten...
Good morning. My name is Tilde. I come from Sweden, from a small village, and I would like to present 3 priorities to you, which all of the citizens here have agreed upon and which are close to our heart. The first priority is a Europe that's based on solidarity, social justice and equality. What's important for citizens is that there are equal rights across the board in terms of health, medical care, education, lifelong learning, the same possibilities for people living in rural areas as for those living in towns and cities. to take into account the differences that exist in geographical terms and demographic terms. There should be no discrimination based on age, residence, nationality, sex, religion, or political preferences. Instead, citizens should have living conditions, working conditions which are decent, and salaries that are decent. Europe is more than an economic union. The member states should be showing more solidarity to each other. We're a family, and we should be behaving as such in times of crisis. Secondly, the European Union needs to be audacious and act rapidly to become a world leader in the field of environment and the climate by speeding up the green transition, improving railways, providing sustainable transport and a genuinely circular economy. There is no time to lose. Changes are necessary in numerous areas: agriculture, biodiversity, the economy, energy, transport, education, health, the digital transition, and climate diplomacy. We have a great deal of research capacity. We can do this. If climate becomes a priority, then we can also expect a prosperous future. Thirdly, you asked us for help. You asked us how we can ensure that we can shore up democracy in Europe in the future, and we've answered. We want to be able to act in crises rapidly, and the principle of unanimity needs to be rethought, and you need more involvement of citizens. Thank you very much. I'd like to pass the floor now to my colleague, Jean-Régis.
Je m'appelle Jean-Régis et j'ai la...
My name is Jean-Régis, and I've been fortunate enough to be a part of this adventure. I'm 78 years old. I live in a lovely village in Normandy. These are the priorities for European citizens: a strong Europe in the world, where we are more united than ever, where the European Union is given competences in the field of foreign affairs. This conference could be at the basis for a more united Europe, more consistent Europe in political terms, more coherent. Everything can be summarized in one word: union. It's an imperative that we provide ourselves with the resources to be able to overcome this challenge. The war that is knocking on our doors to the east shows how important this is. A Europe that's economically autonomous to ensure its competitiveness in the world. We have to achieve this goal in strategic key sectors: agriculture, energy, industry, health. For that to happen, we have to avoid dependency on third countries for numerous sensitive products. Let's, in fact, encourage the talent of our citizens and avoid a brain drain. Europe supports fundamental values and principles, and the current war shows how fragile our democracies can be. This fight for freedom is something that never should be forgotten. Throughout the whole of this process, we've reiterated these fundamental values: that we need to provide a dignified welcome to refugees and immigrants, proper health care, fighting against corruption, protecting nature and biodiversity, and that this should be cross-cutting and a more democratic union too. Apart from what Tilda has already said on the environment, in the film The Day After Tomorrow that came out of 2004, a climate skeptic who had to migrate following a climate disaster said, "We all felt a huge amount of humility when faced with the destructive force of nature. Numerous people are now actually refugees in what was called the Third World. We needed them. They allowed us to come into their lands. They welcomed us." I'd now like to pass the floor to Kasper Parol.
Nazywam się Kacper.
My name is Kacper Parol and I'm 23 years old. I come from Gniezno, the first capital of Poland. I love my country, Poland, which is why exactly 1 year ago, together with other young people, I founded the Impulse Foundation, which supports the participation of the young generation in public life. We, the young, want to be heard so that we can fight for our future. And our future is here in the European Union. Unfortunately, we live in a world of increasing threats. The tragic war in Ukraine, a terrifying climate crisis, the foundations of democracy under attack. We must stand together. Therefore, together, let us build a European identity that is resilient and resistant to everything, an identity that complements but does not replace our national identities. Many of the people I met here at this conference did not feel European. Today, with time, we can all say together, we are the citizens of Europe. We need to further increase our influence in the European Union. We need to open up new horizons. We need more mobility, more exchanges, more education. We need more Europe. And today, more than ever before, we need to empower young people. It was decided to invite 16-year-olds to this conference. And we are very grateful for this. It's a very good starting point. But we need more. We, the young, feel that we are underrepresented. We are excluded from the decision-making process. We are not being heard when we talk about our problems, about how hard it is to become independent, about how hard it is to find housing, about inadequate education, about discrimination against sexual minorities in many countries, and the crisis in mental health. They do not listen to us when we talk that the inadequate action on the climate crisis is stealing our future. The war in the Ukraine has the same source as the climate crisis. And the source is fossil fuel that fuels conflict. If we stick with fossil fuels, we will finance the war. We should give up fossil fuels. Let's act together. Let's impose total embargo. And still, I'm full of hope. Here in this chamber, the young people are being heard. This voice should be heard every day in every corner of the European Union. Leadership is where young people have a say for their future. It's a great opportunity. Let it not go to waste. Thank you very much. And now I hand over to Laura Maria Cinquini.
Il mio nome è Laura Maria.
My name is Laura Maria Cinquini. I'm 23 years old. Today I am concluding the speeches of citizens by stressing an important point. At the start, nobody knew what the result of this conference would be. The result of an event bringing together more than 800 citizens from the whole of Europe, different age citizens, speaking different languages, having different experiences of life. Apart from the initial doubts, this diversity was not an obstacle. On the contrary, as we got to work, we connected with each other. We entered into a kind of sync. Because we're not experts on the subjects of the conference or experts in European politics, but we are experts in real life. We go to work, we live in the countryside, in towns, we do night shifts, we study, we have children, we take public transport. In summary, we understand the ordinary problems experienced by ordinary people. Being asked to get to work, we've used the experience of our own lives, and we rolled up our sleeves, and we managed to reach agreement on proposals for genuine qualitative changes. Of course, we could have done with more time to perfect our work, and I would repeat, we're not professional politicians. but we are satisfied. What we are now handing over to you is the fruit of months of sacrifice and dedication, and as such should be respected. We therefore call on you to very carefully read all of our proposals and to implement all of them without distorting them, without being selective depending on your political agendas or interests, without limiting yourselves to those proposals that don't require treaty change. These proposals we are presenting you with outline a new Europe, a Europe that we believe in, and a Europe that we will continue to fight for, a Europe which we need now. Please don't waste this opportunity and don't delude yourselves or disappoint us, because never have we felt more united, more European, and more trustful in a better future than we do now. Thank you.
Köszönöm, kedves kollégáim! Köszönöm, kedves kollégáim!
Thank you, my dear colleagues. Thank you once again. My name is Peter Csakay from Hungary, and the word I've chosen is camaraderie. We arrived here at a particular point in the conference, and now I'd like to ask the presidents of the European institutions, the three co-presidents of the conference and citizens to stand to receive the report of the conference. This report contains 49 recommendations with 300 concrete actions based on the suggestions from citizens. They've been debated by the 449 members of the plenary and will be handed to the presidents of the three European institutions. We're now going to have a family photo, and I would like all of us to be included in it. Thank you.
QR kód beolvasásával megtekinthetik a konferenciáról készült jelentést.
And this is the report on the conference, which you'll be able to see online.
Pozdrav!
Hello, my name is Katarina Rende Dominis. I come from beautiful Croatia. I have had the honor to represent national events in Croatia. I'm 25 and my family comes from 2 European nations. For me and my family, Europe stands for being united and for freedom and for a single European identity. I work and volunteer for the association Youth in the EU, which operates from Šibenik, a small and charming city on the Adriatic coast. The word I have chosen that for me would best represent the experience of the conference is together, because this conference is a proof that EU institutions and citizens can jointly create a better future and that we are all citizens with a common goal of improvement. We have just enjoyed the sounds of the European hymn, The Ode to Joy by Beethoven, performed by young artists from all over Europe. Demos Europe Orchestra is a string orchestra initiated as an inclusion project by the Paris Philharmonic Orchestra during the French presidency of the EU. They are here with us as an example that art and music have no borders. Music has the magical power of uniting us in the emotional enjoyment of its beauty. So I would like us to welcome once again Demos Europe Orchestra, which will now perform Vivaldi's L'Estro Armonico No. 3.
Dobrý deň.
Good afternoon. I'm Zuzana Hozlarova. I'm a 22-year-old student of European Studies and of the half from a small place in Slovakia, a town called Nové Zámky. I'm extremely honored to have been able to represent Slovak citizens at the conference on the future of Europe, at national panels and events. I also wanted to share with you a word which for me symbolizes the spirit of the conference. But I must admit that over the past year, after everything we have experienced here, I've been speechless, and the only feeling I'm carrying along home is gratitude. The presidents of the three institutions, together with four citizens representing European civil panels, will now be addressing you. Roberta Metsola, President of the European Parliament, will address you, will be the first speaker. The floor is yours, Madam Metsola.
Thank you, Susanna. President von der Leyen, President Macron, Prime Minister Costa, dear Europeans, I am so proud to be here today as we come to this milestone in this unique exercise in active citizenship, in Europe building, in future-proofing our foundations. Among the many speeches we hear today, I think there is one message that we can take away today. Europe's future is yet unwritten, and our story depends on you, on all of us. This debate took on a new reality on February 24th, when President Putin ordered his army to invade Ukraine, an act of medieval aggression that has changed the world. The post-February 24th world is a very different one, a more dangerous one, and Europe's role has changed with it. We cannot afford to lose any more time. How we have responded to the invasion and how we must continue to respond is the litmus test of our values. The unity and resolve of our response has confounded critics and made us proud to be European. That must be the blueprint going forward. But as we speak here, Ukraine is still being invaded. Bombs are still killing indiscriminately. Women are still being raped. Millions have fled and will continue to do so. People are still trapped in the tunnels under Mariupol. And Ukrainians look to Europe for support because they know that millions of Europeans who were forced to spend half a century behind the yoke of the Iron Curtain will tell you there is no alternative to Europe. The future of Europe is tied to the future of Ukraine. The threat that we face is real, and the cost of failure is momentous. And I ask, how will history judge our actions? Will future generations read about the triumph of multilateralism over isolationism, the cementing of an interdependent relationship between nations and people who are proud of their differences, as Laura said earlier, but who understand that in this new world, the future can only be together? That is all up to us. That is our responsibility. And let me tell you here today that the European Parliament will fight for a stronger Europe and all of what Europe means. And that means freedom, it means democracy, it means the rule of law, it means justice, solidarity, equality of opportunity. And that means that we must listen more than we speak, And this exercise must be about you, about our project working for people in villages and towns and regions across Europe. Europe has a proud history. We have created the common market, ensured enlargement to successive states, embraced universal suffrage, eliminated internal borders, created a common currency, and enshrined fundamental rights into our treaties. Our European project has been a success story. It may not be perfect, but we represent a bastion of liberal democracy, of personal freedoms, of liberty of thought, of safety and security. And that is what inspires millions and millions of people in Europe and around the world. However, this conference also proves that there exists a gap between what people expect and what Europe is able to deliver at the moment. And that is why we need a convention as the next step. And that is what the European Parliament will insist on. There are issues that simply cannot wait. That is true for defence. We need a new security and defence policy because we know that we need each other, that alone we are vulnerable. And here we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can complement rather than compete with existing alliances. It is true for energy. We are still too reliant on autocrats, where energy islands still exist, where we must support each other as we disentangle ourselves from the Kremlin and invest in alternative energy sources, where we understand that renewable energy is as much about security as it is about the environment. But we can only do that together. We can only do that together. This is also true for climate change. The challenge of a generation that Europe has proudly led the global charge on. It is true for health, where we must heed the lessons of the pandemic and make our health systems interconnected, share information and pool resources. When the next virus hits us, we cannot let it shut down our lives. Our first instinct cannot be to recreate the borders of the past. It is true for our economic model, where we must ensure enough flexibility without tying the hands for generations to come, where we are able to create jobs and the jobs that we need to thrive. It is true for migration, as we heard in the videos and the testimonies, where we still need a system that is fair with those who are in need of protection, that is firm with those who are not, but that is strong against those who abuse the most vulnerable people on the planet. It is true for equality and solidarity. Our Europe must remain a place where you can be who you wish to be, where your potential is not impacted by your birthplace, your gender or sexual orientation. A Europe that stands up for our rights, for women, for minorities, for us all. A Europe that leaves nobody behind. In all these areas and more, I want Europe to lead. Because if it is not us, it will simply be someone else. Dear Europeans, this conference on the future of Europe involved hundreds of thousands of people across Europe. This has been an intense experience in the power of participatory democracy after months of discussions and powerful debate. I want to thank you for believing in the promise of Europe. And I want to specifically thank Guy Verhofstadt and Dubravka Suica and the different presidencies of the Council, Prime Minister Costa, Minister Clément Bon here today. Thank you for leading the process. Thank you. I also want to thank our late President, David Sassoli, who would be so proud. He would be so proud today. And of course, none of this could have been done without all the staff. And I ask you please to applaud the staff of the European Parliament and the institutions who really, really worked for this to happen. I thank you all for believing in this exercise, for fighting for Europe, for facing down the cynics. It is easier to be cynical, to be populist, to look inwards, but we should expose populism, cynicism, and nationalism for what they are. False hope sold by those with no answers, those who are afraid to forge the hard and long road of progress. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe has never been afraid, and now it is time to step up and not step back. We are once again at a defining moment of European integration, and no suggestion for change should be off limits. Whatever process is required in order for us to get there should be embraced. As a student, I got involved in politics because I believed my generation's place was Europe. I believe this still. We see no old and no new Europe. We see no big and no small states. We understand that ideas are bigger than geography. That feeling 18 years ago, when 10 countries, including my own, joined the European Union, is a moment that will remain with me forever. We counted the seconds to midnight on May Day, and you could feel the joy, the hope, the passion with which people believed. People today in Ukraine, in Georgia, in Moldova, and still in the Western Balkans are looking to us with the same sense of purpose. Of course, every country must follow its own path, but we should not be afraid to unleash the power of Europe to change people's lives for the better, as it did for my country. Finally, we are gathered here on Europe Day during the year dedicated to youth in the seat of the European Parliament in Strasbourg. There is nowhere more symbolic of the power of democracy, of the power of Europe to take the next steps together. This is the moment to answer Europe's call. This is our time. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon. I'm Camille Gerard. I joined the conference when I was 16 years old, and for me the word that describes this adventure is hope. When I'm 65, in 2070, I'd like to be able to say to my grandchildren that many of the positive changes in Europe emerged from this unique exercise in 2021. Their grandmother went to the stage together with prominent leaders who showed a great sense of responsibility and made every effort to change Europe in the interest of all its citizens. Let me now introduce my co-citizens, Konstantinos Andreadakis from Greece and Camilla Jensen from Denmark. They are here as representatives of the European Citizens Panels.
Αγαπητοί Ευρωπαίοι, στη διαδρομή της...
Dear Europeans, During this conference, since the first phone call which surprised us with a proposal to take part, and the many hours of debate with other members in these rooms of the European Parliament, all the way through until today, this path has been unique for us citizens, but it's also been a process of great responsibility. It's a feeling of great responsibility that the members of the panel have, and that is the main reason why this conference has exceeded all expectations. Let me describe two of the conclusions that have emerged from this conference. Firstly, I would say that the citizens of the European Union have shown respect for the fundamental values and principles of the European Union. Secondly, perhaps more importantly for the leaders of the European Union, there is a need to review certain elements of the treaties so that the European Union can move forward, can be more effective and flexible when it comes to taking the decisions that are necessary to tackle the various problems that arise. What we're requesting is a stronger Europe. We're asking for more Europe. Given what I've seen over the last 8 months in the European Parliament, I firmly believe that the European Union has the strength that is necessary to achieve what has to be done. Thank you very much, and let me give the floor to Camilla.
Borgerpanelerne har været en rejse gennem mange landskaber. Det første landskab, vi mødte, var et landskab.
Taking part in the panels has been a trip through many different landscapes, and one of them was the landscape of hopes and dreams when we were asked, what do you want for the future of Europe? And the second landscape was that of utopia, because in dreams everything's possible. I recall a citizen who said that she wanted to see a lift in every building in Europe. That's obviously utopian. But then we moved on to the third landscape, dialogue, and it emerged clearly that what she wanted was social security, i.e. access to assistance for the elderly wherever they may be. From there emerged a position on social security and a guarantee for assistance for the elderly right across Europe. And that's an example of how dreams, utopias can all become clear proposals with clear messages. However, you can only act on the basis of the knowledge that you have. European citizens have now provided this knowledge. It's written down black on white. We've provided precious knowledge, and now it's up to you to take responsibility for what we've done, for what you've been given. There is now a historic possibility, so seize the opportunity with both hands. Thank you.
J'ai maintenant le plaisir.
I now have the pleasure of introducing the President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen. You have the floor, ma'am.
Nous devons penser et planifier.
We need to think about and plan for a united Europe as if it were possible to create it immediately every day. We need to reject the ideas of those who put everything off until tomorrow. If things are genuinely possible, we can start to implement them today.
Dear Roberta, President Macron, cher Emmanuel, Prime Minister Costa, car Antonio, dear Dubravka, Switzer, dear Guy Verhofstadt, cher Ministre Clément Beaune, Excellences, honourable members, but most and foremost, my dear and fellow Europeans. On this very special day of Europe, I could not think of any more fitting way to start than by using these words of Ursula Hirschmann. For those who do not know her story, Ursula Hirschmann was an architect and builder of today's free and united Europe. She resisted the rise of Nazism in Berlin in the early 1930s. She shaped the future of Europe on the island of Ventotene in the 1940s. She pioneered women's rights all across Europe. The courage of her actions and of her convictions helped to make Europe what it is today. And I start with this picture because for Europe, the memory of our past has always framed our future. And that is all the more important at a time when the unthinkable has returned to our continent. Russia's flagrant attempts to redraw maps and to rewrite even the most tragic parts of our history have reminded us of the dangers of losing our grip on both our past and our future. On living in a perpetual present and thinking that things can never be different, that there cannot be better ways of doing things, and even worse, that things will always stay the same if only we do not change. That's so wrong. Standing still is falling back. But this conference has shown us that Europeans are determined not to make this mistake. You have told us that you want to build a better future by living up to the most enduring promises of the past, promises of peace and prosperity, fairness and progress, of a Europe that is social and sustainable, that is caring and daring, just like Ursula Hirschmann and all those who went before us. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference has spoken clearly. And I'm delighted to see so many of you here today. Through your 49 proposals and more than 300 measures, you have weaved and crafted a vision of a Europe that delivers on what matters most, that helps to make everyday life better, that is not confined to one place, but it is at your side when you need it. On everyday priorities, such as the air we breathe, or the food we eat, the education that we give to our children, and the houses that we bring them up in. It is a vision of a Europe that pools its strengths and capacities and diversity to tackle the biggest challenges, from climate change or nature loss to pandemics or security in our region. A Europe that has a stronger capacity to activate and uphold its values and the rule of law. A Europe that is able to provide for itself in vital areas, from energy to food, from materials to medicines, from digital chips to green technologies. A Europe that delivers unique social protections and benefits all the way through these major transitions. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to address every single one of you who took part in this conference. Your message has been well received, and now it's time to deliver. That is what I promised when I stood for election in this very house 2.5 years ago. And together we have proven that we can do just that, with the powers that already exist, even amidst a pandemic or war. Whether procuring billions of vaccines for citizens across Europe and our neighborhood, or kickstarting the economy after the pandemic through Next Generation EU, whether setting an ambitious and legally binding path to climate neutrality, or setting rules of the game in the digital world, or supporting small businesses to retain their staff during the pandemic. None of this, none, would have been explicitly foreseen in the treaties. But it was possible, and we did it together, because Europeans expected their union to step up. So, next month already, we will set out what is needed to bring your proposals to life and respond the best we can. In some areas, your proposals give us a push to speed up work already ongoing. For example, on the European Green Deal, or on making society fairer. So that means accelerating negotiations on the Fit for 55 package, so that we can boost renewable energies, that we can save energy, and finally wean ourselves out of fossil fuels. It has to be. And it means ensuring that our proposal on minimum wages becomes law, so that work pays for all. In other areas, we have already started the work you have asked for. The Health Working Group, for example, proposed creating a European health data space, which would facilitate the exchange of health data across borders. Well, my Commission delivered last week with a proposal. And in the next weeks and months, we will bring out proposals you have been asking for. For example, restoring our nature, or cutting down waste from package, or banning products made by forced labor from entering our European market. On all of these upcoming ideas, we will look closely at your proposals so that we can best cater for what you have been asking for. The point is, there is already a lot we can do without delay. And that also goes for those recommendations which will need us to take new actions. So to make sure that we follow up swiftly, I will announce the first new proposals responding to your reports in my State of the Union address in September already. But my fellow Europeans, even beyond this, there is a need to go further. For example, I have always argued that unanimity voting in some key areas simply no longer makes sense if we want to be able to move faster. Or that Europe should play a greater role, for example, in health or defense, after the experience of the last 2 years. And we need to improve the way our democracy works on a permanent basis. I want to be clear that I will always be on the side of those who want to reform the European Union to make it work better. The point is, you have told us where you want this Europe to go. And it's now up to us to take the most direct way there, either by using the full limits of what we can do within the treaties or, yes, by changing the treaties if need be. Ladies and gentlemen, dear fellow Europeans, democracy has not gone out of fashion, but it must update itself in order to keep improving people's lives. Those are the words of David Sassoli, a great European who stood here a year ago together with you, dear Antonio Costa, to launch this conference. We all miss him dearly, and I have a very special place for him in my heart today. And I feel pride that citizens from every corner of Europe have brought life to his vision of a vibrant and modern European democracy. We saw it in the national citizens' panels such as those held right across France. And we saw it in the European citizens' panels from Dublin to Natolin, from Florence to Maastricht. It connected men and women who have never engaged with Europe before. Different stories, different languages, different identities, but one shared future to build on. You have proven that this form of democracy works, and I believe we should give it more room. It should become part of the way we make policy. And this is why I will propose that in future we give citizen panels the time and the resources to make recommendations before we present key legislative proposals. Because democracy because I'm convinced that democracy does not end with elections, conferences, or conventions. It needs to be worked on, nurtured, and improved every day. We saw it in the grassroots events held right across Europe, whether debating biodiversity in Varna, gender-based violence in Lisbon, or democracy and subsidiarity in Budapest. And we saw it, indeed, in the image of Linda, the young mother. We saw her earlier this day speaking about the future in this very hemicycle, with holding her baby born halfway through the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the image I want us to celebrate on the 9th of May, an image far more powerful than any military parade and debate going up and down the streets of Moscow as we speak. And I want this image to remind us to never ever take for granted what Europe is and what it means. Europe is a dream that always was, a dream born from tragedy. But today, that dream shines brightest, not only here in this historic place. It shines brightest in the hearts and minds of the people of Kiev and Kharkiv, of Odessa and Mariupol. It shines brightest in the courage of those families and young people bunkered down in subways and basements. It shines brightest of those mourning the senseless, mindless atrocities of Bucha and in Irpin and in every Ukrainian village and town struck by war. And it shines brightest in the eyes of all those young Ukrainians who have found refuge in Europe, a home away from home. Those people, my fellow Europeans, young and old, are willing to fight and to die for their future and for that dream of Europe, that dream that always was, that dream that must always be. So I want to finish with a message. This morning, I had a video conference with President Zelensky, and he wanted to virtually hand me over his answers to the questionnaire of the Commission for the accession process he has applied to. It is more than 5,000 pages. He handed over to me. And therefore, I want to give a very special message to our Ukrainian friends and families. The future of Europe is also your future. The future of our democracy is also the future of your democracy. 77 years ago, war in Europe was replaced with something different, something new. First a community, today a union. It was the day when the future began. It is a future that we have been writing together ever since, as architects and builders of Europe. And the next page, dear Ukrainian friends, is now being written by you, by us, by all of us together. Slava Ukraine, long live Europe.
Dobrý den, jmenuji se Nikolas Moravec.
Good afternoon. My name is Nikola Moravec. I'm from the Czech Republic. I'm 16 years old. I'm the youngest participant in this conference. The word that I have chosen to sum up this conference is game changer. Why? Because this conference will go down in history. Together with Camille and Matouche, we're amongst those who will remember this even in 2090. And now I'd like to invite Doreen Niche from Belgium and Stephanie Hartung from Germany to share their experiences with us. They will be speaking on behalf of the national panels.
Geachte aanwezigen,
Dear attendees, dear European fellow citizens, my name is Doreen Nice. I am 23. I come from Belgium, and I'm actually a professional brewer. But I'd like to sum up this conference as normal European citizens from various backgrounds coming together to work together on our common European future. As a Belgian representative, my experience began in Brussels, where, together with 49 other randomly selected citizens, we spent weekends working on the proposals. And in parallel, throughout Europe, national and regional events were organised to the same end. And then everything came together here in Strasbourg. The citizens from the European panels, the 27 member state representatives, pooled forces and presented their European ideas. And the level of ambition was very high. Everybody wanted to make this conference a success. And that has led to strong quality recommendations being made. There were many overlapping recommendations, but there was also a lot of discussion. And the diversity of views and diversity of backgrounds that we came from were all a positive aspect, and in fact was one of the strengths, and is one of the strengths of the European Union. I cannot accept now that this conference is coming to an end. I refuse to see our proposals as some kind of finishing line where everybody is cheering enthusiastically because we've past the finish. No, we have to implement this in practice. We mustn't see this as an end or a finish. We should see it as a beginning where we all build our European future together. Thank you very much.
sehr verehrte Anwesende,
dear participants, dear citizens of Europe, the proposals of the plenary could not be clearer. We need a Europe that is capable of action. We need a sustainable, just and independent Europe in order to rise to the challenges that the European Union is facing. We citizens have participated in all of the panels and events of this European Conference on the Future of Europe. We've worked hard and we've established great recommendations. We have argued, but we've pulled together and found compromises, and finally we managed to unite, because agreeing on one common line is more important than trying to force through your own individual or national position. Speaking with one voice in unity, that is the great strength of the European Union, especially as we see now in the context of war in Ukraine. And what we have created here, I think, is something that the politicians can reflect. Let us continue the successful dialogue on the future of Europe and open a new page in European citizens' participation. We have given you our recommendations in full confidence that you will address these and implement them soon. Please don't disappoint us. Long live Europe.
Na závěr.
And to conclude today's programme, it's my honour to ask Mr. Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic, to take the floor. I have bad news for you. I'm going to give a speech. But I have good news for you. I'll try to repeat not what has already been well said before I took the floor. Madam President of the European Parliament, dear Roberta, Madam President of the European Commission, dear Ursula, Prime Minister of Portugal, dear Antonio, dear co-presidents, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, members of parliaments, my dear fellow citizens of Europe. World peace can only be safeguarded through creative efforts that reflect the threats that threaten us. These were the words of Robert Schuman on the 9th of May 1950 on the contribution that a vibrant Europe can provide to civilization are more relevant than ever. These creative efforts correspond to the times we live in, and today are more necessary than they were in the past. As you quite rightly said, war has come back to our continent at a time when people in Europe, the Ukrainian people, are fighting for their freedom. It's now the time where you, European citizens, members of parliaments, commissioners, Europeans, citizens, you have achieved an unparalleled exercise in democracy, unparalleled in our history and in the world. This vibrant, creative Europe, a Europe based on actions, you're that Europe's representatives and its artisans. Here in Strasbourg, in this European capital, so close to our hearts. The choice of the French people means that I can stand before you today to say that France will not step away from the task in front of us, because France has resolutely chosen Europe by voting as it has to give me a new mandate to build up a stronger, more robust, more sovereign Europe. The Europe that we're celebrating today is one that we decided a year ago collectively to move into a new stage with President David Sassoli, who we're all thinking of today. You were quite right, all of you, in what you said. And it was under the Portuguese presidency, dear Antonio. And I would like to also welcome the Portuguese Prime Minister, who's attending this today, showing continuity and the importance of this whole exercise. Launched a year ago in a different context in Strasbourg, the capital of European fraternity, in the parliament which pays homage to our most precious value, which is democracy. It's a new stage, an unprecedented democratic exercise in the Union, where we're not bringing Europeans together in a spirit of confrontation to try and find simplistic options, but to think together about what the future of Europe could be, which is what you have done. And it's unprecedented. You've been fully involved at a time of historic challenge in creating an intelligent debate, looking for solutions. Some people want those solutions to be applied immediately. Others feel this will take time. But all of them will feed into the Europe we're building today and for the future. On the 9th of May, freedom and hope in the future have the face of the European Union. It's on behalf of this freedom, on behalf of this hope, that we support and will continue to support Ukraine, its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, and all of the people of Ukraine. What is our goal? Faced with the unilateral decision of Russia to invade Ukraine and aggress its people, to ensure this war concludes as soon as possible, to do everything to ensure that Ukraine will survive, Russia will never win, preserve peace on the rest of the continent of Europe and avoid any escalation. For this war to come to an end, we've adopted unprecedented sanctions to make it difficult to finance the war in Russia, to support Ukraine. We've mobilized military, financial, humanitarian resources like never before, and we need to step these efforts up to ensure we have an effective response when it comes to food security, and we will continue this so that justice can speak. We will fight against the impunity for the crimes that have been committed in Ukraine. We are not, though, at war with Russia. We are fighting in Europe to maintain the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, for the return of peace to our continent. And it's up to Ukraine only to decide on negotiating conditions with Russia. Our duty, though, our duty is to be by Ukraine's sides, to obtain a ceasefire, and then peace. And then we will be there when it comes to rebuilding Ukraine as a part of Europe always.
Because when peace returns to European soil, we will have to build new security balances. And together, we must never give in to the temptation or to humiliation or a desire for revenge, because we know how much that has ravaged the road to peace in the past. So, in the name of this freedom, of this hope, that we have addressed this task, this unparalleled new breath of democracy that you have undertaken, and you've all said it in your own words. You've all contributed to this work, which is now an obligation for us. As you say, what we have today is not the end. It's a kind of a semicolon. It's a pause in this process which we will take forward. The President of the European Commission has promised to attentively study each and every one of your proposals, and I would like to thank her for that. And we have another meeting together in September, as you have heard. On behalf of the Presidency of the Council of the European Union and as representative of the French presidency, I promise that this will not be a mere formality. This will be a process which I am sure will lead to practical and strong concrete proposals that will benefit the people of Europe, because this conference must not stop here.
Ma conviction.
I am convinced, and this conviction is reinforced by all the surrounding circumstances. My conviction is that crises should not turn us away from our agenda. Many of your proposals can be adopted without institutional reform, but they remind us of the importance of our agenda to protect the climate, biodiversity, health, quality of our food, a fairer, more inclusive Europe, a Europe of equality between men and women, a Europe able to defend itself, a Europe of solidarity that defends its values everywhere. Many very concrete proposals have been made by you, and we wish to ensure that we draw all the necessary conclusions from this in our future meetings of the Council, and I commit myself to that. There are also two demands which I want to stress in particular. One is for the independence and effectiveness of Europe, without which our democracy cannot be legitimate. And so these imperatives are the lessons that we draw collectively from the crises that we have just been through, that we are still going through. Independence and effectiveness. More European independence and sovereignty. This is what we need. In all of the crises that we have been through, Europe has been pulling itself together, and we are reminded by your proposals of the agenda set out by our European leaders of strategic independence, the Versailles agenda, the financial crisis that we went through 10 years ago, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, show our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities, the lack of ability to respond quickly enough. So a Europe that is mistress of its own destiny, free in its choices, open to the world. We want to be a partner, but not to be dependent. So we need to remain open without being dependent on others. That is a condition for continuing our European project and our democracies. You have outlined some of the avenues for us to follow, the areas in which we are going to have to work over the next weeks and months. When it comes to defence, to invest more, the need to identify the capabilities that we need, to develop the industrial sectors that we need, to prepare for potential future areas of conflict at sea, in the air, in space, to protect those countries on the border of the European Union who are faced with a new challenge, with a new threat, which has transformed us over the last few weeks. This is our duty, and all we are saying today will become a dead letter if in the next weeks and months we are not able to render our capacity credible, our capacity, our ability to defend ourselves, in particular on our eastern flank. And when it comes to the environment, you've rightly said, we have to move out of fossil fuels. In fact, the war, it requires this of us as well. This actually feeds our climate agenda. The need to be independent and to make Russia face its responsibilities. The war in Ukraine and the desire to get out of our dependency on Russian fossil fuel means us we to move further and faster on climate change. We need to invest in nuclear energy, renewable energies. We need to be energy efficient, sober in our use, and help European citizens face the hike in prices. We need to become an environmental power with our goal of achieving carbon neutrality. And also we have to regain our food sovereignty. We are destabilized by the war in Ukraine. food supply chains are disrupted. So we have to ensure that we have the capacity to produce enough food to defend our own food security and food sovereignty. But we also need to define and reevaluate our strategy vis-à-vis the rest of the world if we want to avoid famine and geopolitical instability on our borders and tragedy throughout the Mediterranean basin. That is our duty as Europeans. And also democratic independence and information independence. This is something that you stress rightly in the proposals that you have put forward. You have begun to show us what we really are, which is a citizens and democratic power. And this is something that makes us unique in the world. This citizens' power is something that we have to keep alive, defending the freedom and integrity of the information that is exchanged in our territories, on our soil, defending the integrity of our democratic processes, and defending throughout European territory democracy and the rule of law. This is what we realize all the more from the heroic combat of our Ukrainian friends, how precarious democracy is and freedom is. So we have to rebuild these through new commitments.
Notre indépendance.
Our independence and sovereignty are the preconditions of our freedom. And the next main point I want to stress is the need for effectiveness, the ability to respond to crises with strength and speed, and do this decisively as democracies. Remember, just 2 years ago, just a year ago, remember what we were hearing. We had some people saying that it might be better if we were an authoritarian power in order to respond to the pandemic, that the Chinese and the Russians were going to be quicker to impose vaccination. But what do we see? Open societies, democratic, transparent processes in our national parliaments and in the European Parliament, that Europe in that context was able to become a health power without treaties, without texts guiding the way. We were able to build a response, a unique, novel response in the face of the pandemic, binding together science, democracy and effectiveness. Managing to produce a vaccine on our soil, becoming the biggest vaccine manufacturing part of the world, while keeping our borders open, exporting and showing vaccine solidarity. That's what Europe is, and that is the Europe that we should be proud of, a Europe of democracy, of open and free science, and of effectiveness. These things go together. So this is the choice that we have to continue. And if I look back over the last 15 years, faced with the economic and financial crisis, we were too slow to respond. Portugal and many others, and Greece, suffered the consequences. We were divided, we relapsed in national responses, we didn't come up with a collective response, and we weren't working together to cope with this crisis that we had imported from across the Atlantic. But the response of the European Central Bank, with the famous saying, whatever it takes, those words pronounced by Mario Draghi, whatever it takes. And in the face of the pandemic, and now in the face of war, we have shown that we can be different. Confronted with a pandemic, with the unique decision in June 2020 to create a new budget, pooled borrowing, a novel response for Europe, borrowing money on the financial markets in order to invest in our European priorities. And in the face of war, for the first time, we decided to mobilize the European Peace Facility to help Ukraine defend itself and to fight in a way that we have never done before. So let us be proud of these choices that we have taken to be effective, without which we wouldn't be here today. discussing this together. So this strength. Yes, I think a round of applause for Europe.
Le défi que vous nous posez.
So the challenge you face us with is to be just as effective in times of peace and without a crisis to goad us. So we have to decide quickly, together, investing massively in the right things, not leaving anyone behind. That is what it is to be European. So faced with this, we also have to reform our texts. That is clear. And I'm forced to say today that one of the avenues for this reform would be to convene a convention to revise the treaties. That is a proposal by the European Parliament, and I approve this. I'm in favour of this. It would mean that we would have to work hard on the basis of all your work and all your proposals to define clearly what our objectives are, because you have to start a convention, a constitutional convention, to know where you're going. So you've given us a very strong remit, a strong framework. So in the coming weeks, we can prepare the ground, seek agreement on all sides. I'm in favour of this institutional reform, and I would like us to be able to discuss this with the necessary courage at the next European Council.
Ceci supposera.
This will mean making progress to make things simpler. So moving forward, making more use of qualified majority voting for our main public policies. We should also continue to make progress and to define ways of showing more solidarity, clarifying our aims and objectives and the objectives of all our institutions, setting objectives that will help us to keep Europe together. Growth, full employment, our climate objectives, where our rules were designed decades ago and were based on objectives which now need to be supplemented in the face of the historic challenges that we face now. Full employment, growth, carbon neutrality, social justice. These objectives must be at the heart of the aims of our institutions.
Enfin, réformer et ouvrir ce chantier, c'est évidemment.
Finally, opening up for these reforms also means providing legitimacy to democratic control, deepening this unprecedented democratic adventure, and continuing these democratic innovations, as we have done through your work. And I'd like to thank the President for having already taken a clear commitment to that just a few moments ago. But we know we need to go further. Our election rules, our rules to appoint our representatives, our monitoring rules, our rights of initiative, the right of initiative for the European Parliament, all of that should be at the heart of this future convention.
Je crois très profondément.
I firmly believe that we can undertake this work, and I think we can be effective. I think that sticking to these environmental, economic and other goals mean that we will be effective, and this will be a way of keeping our Europe together, because without these objectives we will no longer be able to persuade our citizens that the European Union protects them and enables us to move forward. Now, obviously, not everyone will necessarily agree, but we shouldn't worry about differences. These have always been fertile for the European Union, and they have never been excluded. They're part of what we do, and they exist, the Euro, Schengen, etc. But I've been struck during recent years as to how the will to stick together as a union of 27 means that we move forward and stick together. We, the heads of state and government, for example, never managed to meet as the Eurogroup. We are the only co-owners who can't meet as co-owners of a building. We have to invite the whole street. We're worried about being more ambitious, and it's always the same thing from the Euro to Schengen. And we're wrong on that, because this grouping doesn't exclude anyone, but what it does is enables those who want to move faster to bring the others with them in their slipstream, rather than making things more risky and holding back. I know that there are concerns when it comes to differing speeds, but they already exist. We need to converge. We shouldn't be excluding, but we also shouldn't let the skeptics and those who are most hesitant hold us back. We need to ensure that Europe can affirm itself as a power. And this differentiation open to all of us, which is faithful to our history and the ambitions launched by our founding fathers, by Jacques Delors, for our Europe, are important, and this is a condition for us to be ambitious and effective.
Enfin, pour finir, et je m'extrais.
To conclude, let me go back to the context. I know that my proposals wouldn't be complete if I didn't respond to this point that emerged from your proposals. Now, the war in Ukraine and the legitimate aspirations of Ukraine, like those of Georgia and Moldova, who also want to join the European Union, mean that we have to rethink our geography and the organisation of our continent. And here, with the same sincerity that you've conducted your work, I want to say that Ukraine, because of its struggle and because of its courage, is already a member of Europe, of our family, of our union.
Mais même si nous lui accordions demain le statut.
But even if we were to give it the status of candidate country tomorrow, I hope we move forward towards accession rapidly. But even if we were to do that, we all know only too well that the process for accession would take several years. In truth, it would probably take several decades. And that is the truth. Unless we decide to lower the standards for accession and rethink the unity of our Europe, and also, partially, the principles that we hold. Let's be clear here. The European Union, given its level of integration and ambition, cannot, in the short term, be the only way in which the European continent can be structured. There are several countries, for example in the Western Balkans, who are engaged in the accession process, and that needs to continue. Their vocation is clear. But we obviously also need, given the new geopolitical context, to find a way to see our Europe, to ensure that it's unified and stable without making the intimacy within the European Union more fragile. We have a historic duty here, not to do things the way that we've always done and to say the only response is accession. What we need to do is open up a historic process of reflection, given the events that are currently taking place, on the construction of our continent. Our family is one of common values. It's been abandoned by Russia. We are being shaken by the tides of history. In 1989, President François Mitterrand said when the Soviet Union was falling apart that he wanted to see a confederation of European states. This was perhaps too precocious an idea. It included Russia in this confederation, which rapidly was seen as unacceptable for states who had just escaped the Soviet yoke. But it raised an interesting question which remains. How should we organize Europe in a political manner? And how can we go further than the European Union? It's our historic obligation now to respond to that question. I think I would here today qualify what I'm talking about as a European political community. This new European organization would enable democratic European nations who adhere to our values to find a new space for political cooperation, for security, for energy cooperation, transport cooperation, to invest in infrastructure where people could circulate, particularly young people. Joining wouldn't mean that you couldn't in the future join the European Union. And it also wouldn't be limited to those who have left the European Union. Let's bring Europe together on the basis of its geography, on the basis of democratic values, with a desire to preserve the unity of our continent. And we want to also preserve the strength and ambition of our integration. So this is a proposal to respond to your proposals. It's a proposal I wanted to make to you today. Now, during the coming weeks and months, I will consult and work with all states and governments who are interested in this project to try and fulfill it, because I think this is important for the future and stability of our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, a year ago I said that my hope was that this conference would see the return of great dreams and great ambitions, and you also wanted that to happen. That's what you've achieved. So together, that's what we're going to do. That is Europe. Europe is crazy dreams, unprecedented ambition, and then the collective ability to build compromises which sometimes seem laborious and which are the language of Europe. Constant translation. We need to act in a strong manner, move fast, and dream big. These words don't only belong to the United States or China. Let's make these words our own. Let's maintain the spirit that wouldn't exist without the unique nature of Europe. Our Europe is a unique continent. Major celebrations are carried out by everyone speaking their own language and having what they say interpreted. And we also have our own universe, which is music, European anthems. So this path, which we started here in Strasbourg, I think, traces a Strasbourg desire for a united, democratic and ambitious Europe. We need to be faithful to that idea, all of us together. You can count on me.
Merci beaucoup.
Je tiens à tous vous remercier.
I would like to thank all of you for having joined us today on this Day of Europe, for this event that marks the end of the Conference on the Future of Europe. This is the beginning of a new story. The words that Linda wanted to share with you to describe her adventure with us, the word was unbelievable. We all count on you, decision makers and European leaders, to show the citizens of Europe that something unique and significant has just occurred. This event is important for us and for future generations. We thank you and all of those who have contributed to make this conference such a success. I would like to wish all of you a very happy Europe Day.
Escucha, hermano, la canción de la alegría. El canto alegre del que espera un nuevo día. Ven, canta, sueña cantando, vive soñando el nuevo sol. En que los hombres volverán a ser hermanos. Ven, canta, sueña cantando, vive soñando el nuevo sol. En que los hombres volverán a ser hermanos.
Si en tu camino solo existe la tristeza,